did my PhD at the University of Georgia. He stayed at Georgia because he's a loyal professor, right? And he's also traveling around the world presenting on expertise. And his website is performancematters.com, where he talks about different ways for coaches to really improve how their students are going to become. We have handouts here. Paul is also the author of 7 different books. And I have some right here that you might be able to earn if you ask the right questions. And we'll have a couple tomorrow for the raffle. Dr. Paul Schempp.
Thank you. What a beautiful morning, huh? Too bad we got to be indoors. Actually, you got a great view. Mine's not too bad. Help me out a little bit to let me know a little bit about yourselves. I'm making an assumption here. Most of you have been in the business at least 2 years. All right. Anybody less than 2 years? Okay, good. How many people have been in the business more than 10 years? Okay, great. What I've decided to do this morning is a little bit different than I do for most groups when I talk to coaches or teachers. What I've decided to do is share with you some of the research on the development of expertise, specifically the 5 stages people go through in becoming experts. And what I'd like to do is apply that to the players that you teach and coach. Sophie mentioned that I often go around the world working with different organizations. One of the organizations that I worked with extensively was the Swedish Golf Federation. If you know anything about Swedish golf, for a while it was fairly successful. But think about it, Sweden. Sweden. That's where summer is measured in minutes, right? And yet, we turned out some very remarkable golfers. In fact, Annika Sorenstam is probably considered the greatest female golfer in history. The males have been fairly well. One of the players I work with, Henrik Stenson, was recently ranked as highest 3rd in the world. Now, think about that. That's like me sending you over to Saudi Arabia and tell you to develop ice hockey players. So how did we do it? One of the things we did is we realized that expert or elite performers do not learn the same way as beginners. Yet when I watch a lot of coaches and teachers in all sports, they teach everybody the same way. And I wonder why. And so what I thought I'd do this morning is share with you what the research says about expertise and then make an application to player development in tennis, if you're our event. Let's begin with this. Research has shown, believe it or not, that there are no characteristics that you bring into this world that will determine how good you can be at anything. Let me put it another way. There are no characteristics that can predict somebody's level of expertise. In other words, no one is born an expert. Now, granted, there are certain qualities that you can bring to certain events that are going to help you out. For example, in tennis, isn't it helpful if you could be fairly tall? Of course it is. But think about all the great players that weren't tall. How about being quick? Yes, of course, but only to certain degrees. How about people that have better strategic skills? They can compensate for that. So yes, there are inherent qualities that can benefit you, but none can actually determine how well you'll be successful. Now, within limits, you're right. If somebody is born with severe physical disabilities, it's not going to happen for them. I will never play linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons. Just don't have the physical capabilities. Right. But does that mean I could never play for the Atlanta Falcons? Well, I'm probably a little past my prime. But at some point, I probably could have doing certain things. Right. A kicker, a punter, for example. All right. So let's talk about then what it takes to develop expertise. 3 things, and 3 things only. So when you think about particularly players that you're working with that are in the higher levels, what about their experience? What about their skills? And what about their knowledge? I can't speak specifically to tennis, but I know in golf, one of the reasons that we were successful in Sweden is because almost everybody else was focused on one area only. Which of those 3 do you think they focused on? Skills. Skills. They were trying. Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Sorry.
Paul, that's you.
Okay. I saw him, but I already hugged him. I was going to do it in public. All right. So when you think about the development of expertise, if you focused only on skills, you're missing 2/3 of the pie, 2/3 of the whole. And one of the things that helped us with the suite is we focused on multidimensional aspects of their performance, not just the skills. In fact, I was at the US Open one year, golf now, US Open, and I was standing next to, I won't give the names, but he was currently ranked the second highest player in the world. And his golf instructor was there the night before the tournament started, trying to teach him how to swing the golf club. What do you think he's carrying with him to the first tee the next morning? All of these mechanical thoughts. You're right, he didn't make the cut, right? Because he was focused on the wrong thing at the wrong time. So let's talk about what it takes then. What I did, if you look at this, and it's in your notes, we know that expertise, and think about your players, develops in 5 stages. We start obviously as beginners, and then we move to what we might call capable level. In other words, we've got certain fundamental skills that can allow us to do certain things. We could probably play a reasonable round with most people if we're capable. We have competent players. That's probably most of the players in your clubs or the clients that you have. And then finally, proficient. That's like the top of most amateur players, if you will, are proficient. And then we get to the upper level, the experts, if you will. What I did is I went to the USTA site and I read their requirements and their qualifications for that self-ranking system that they have. Most of you are very familiar with that. And I found that when I read the qualities for beginners, they really fit with the 1.5, 2.0 player. When you look at the 2.5, 3.0 player, that's really the definition of capable. All right, competence, 3.5 to about 4.5. Again, a little bit more room in there. You got the 4.0s as well, but those are the competent players. Proficient players, 5.0, 5.5, and then obviously the expert, 6.0, 7.0. Now, again, let me start with the thesis that you teach these people differently because they're at different stages of expertise. So what I'd like to do with the rest of the time this morning is talk to you what each of those areas, if you will, have qualities, what those qualities are that define that somebody being in that characteristic, and what it means to you as a teacher or a coach, what you need to do that would help you move the player from beginner to capable, or from proficient to expert. What do you need to do? You ready? What I'd like to do before I actually get into we'll start with the beginners, obviously, is I'd like you to think about a player or a couple of players that you have in each of these areas. Would you do that for a minute? And if you would, at your table, would you identify who those players are to the other people? Just tell them who they are and what level they are. Go ahead, if you don't mind. Players that you currently work with. And if you don't have one at one level, just skip it. Go ahead. Who are you working with? Go ahead. Talk to each other.
That's the base of it. 3 years, 4.5. And proficient. Proficient is working, but they play that would say more, that's fine. So he played as a kid. He's played college. Back up and then got married. He's been playing for 10, 15 years. And then expert, us.
Okay, everybody got some players in mind? Because it would be helpful if I could, when I make a point, you could relate it to a player you're currently working with. I think that would be most useful for you. Now, again, 3 things determine expertise: experience, knowledge, and skills. So each of these areas are defined by those 3 qualities. So obviously, the beginner is the person with the least amount of experience, right? In most cases, the expert has the greatest amount of experience. Not always. I'm sure many of you know competent players that have been playing for years and years, 65-year-olds that started when they were 3 months old. They've got lots of years of experience. However, they didn't progress that far. So experience alone doesn't make somebody great. Now let me just take, if you will, a sidestep here. Because experience is part of expertise, the experts are older or younger than most beginners you work with. Older, yeah, older. Now, how many of you do youth programs? Okay. And same people, do you also work with people who might be 45 years of age older? Okay, great. Would you agree with me that the kids learn faster than the adults? Do you know why? Most sport instructors don't know why. Okay. What's that?
More visual.
In part, yes. It actually has to do with neurological responses. If you're interested in the word, I'll email it to you. It's called myelination. Anybody hear about that, myelination? What it is when you learn a motor skill, it's an electrical pattern that goes through your body that tells your muscles to contract. Makes sense, right? Well, myelination is the process by which those neural paths are insulated, if you will, which allows you to respond automatically. You don't have to think about it. The impulse just goes through. Well, you myelinate your nerves or your neurons when you're young. There's lots of it. It happens all the time. That's why kids find it so easy to do things like ride a bicycle or learn a language. And yet adults, you stop myelinating almost completely by the time you're about 45, 50. So it becomes increasingly more difficult to learn skills because your body isn't receptive to adapting to new motor patterns. So what that means is, for those of you that are working with youth, you kind of have to make sure that they get the fundamental skills early in their careers, because it's going to dictate how well they're going to be, or how much success they can have later. So in terms of technique, this is really important. Probably some of you have heard of a guy that was born in Czechoslovakia by the name of Ivan Lendl. Ivan and I actually became good friends because I do a lot of work in golf. Guess what his passion is? Golf. Most of you know he had two of his older daughters go to golf scholarship on the University of Florida, which really hurt me being from the University of Georgia. All I can say is he really didn't want them to go to college anyways. I think the third one's in equestrian events. But Ivan and I were talking about how people develop in skills. And he believes, and I don't know if you agree with this, that for most players, their strokes are set by the age of 14. Would you agree with that? That's up to you. That's just Ivan's opinion. He didn't think you're really going to change much in a player's strokes much after the age of 14. And he believed that applied to both men and women. Maybe women learn the strokes easier. So again, it's important that you teach at that stage in ways that they can develop technically, competently. Let's start with a beginner. One of the keys to beginners is the way they think. They are rational, but you have to explain things so it absolutely is crystal clear to them. They cannot process a theory or a belief. They're inflexible. They know one way to do it. They also like to know procedures. Step. Here's the first thing you do. Here's the second thing you do. And here's the third thing you do. And by the way, if you use numbers, it's great. They love it. And they're rule-bound. These are the rules. What do I need to know to hit a serve? What are the three key things? And here's the challenge for you as an instructor. What are the three key things? And by the way, this is one of the things that separates the good teachers from the great teachers. The great teachers can boil it down to 1, 2, or 3 points. And they focus on those exclusively. You listen to a beginning instructor, and they think they get paid by the word, right? You listen to an experienced instructor, and they're probably doing more of this. And then they'll say one thing during the whole lesson, and it'll make the biggest difference in the world. So you don't get paid by the word, you get paid by the point that will help the player learn. And that's what you've got to do with beginners. Think about always giving them something to do with a number. Here's 3 things you need to know. If I came to you as a beginner, and you said, I'm sorry, your name is? Yumang, if you said to me, Paul, I can teach you 2 things that are absolutely going to improve your serve. You've got my attention. What are they? Right. And then you tell them to me, put me through practice. And then I'm ready to leave. You say, Paul, what are the 2 things I told you about your serve? Bang, bang. All right, I've got it. So that's what beginners need. They need that very solid, substantive information. Not a lot of it, but they have to know the key points. They will conform to norms and traditions, meaning that they will watch the other players. They will try, in most cases, dress like the other players. They will try to have the same equipment like the other players. They're not looking to be different. They're looking to fit in most cases. You watch kids, they like to do something that's a little different. Maybe they're going to get the real fancy Oakleys or whatever it is. But for the most part, they're all going to be pretty much dressed alike. They're all going to act alike. And so when you're working with youth, or even senior citizen beginners, they're going to want to know what the norms and traditions are of tennis. And you know it because you've grown up in it. They don't. So let them know what tennis is all about, the spirit of the game, if you will, so they can begin to appreciate it. Again, many instructors don't include that. Beginners look for it. That's when they fall in love with the game. They don't fall in love with the two things that are going to make my serve great. All right, here's a key point. Beginners do not take responsibility for their outcomes. For example, I'm not good at serving. I just stink. I'm just not that good. It's not anything that I can control. It just happens. I'm just lousy. So maybe I should go do golf. Maybe I should go do tennis stringing rather than tennis stroking. They don't take responsibility. Consequently, they don't understand how to improve because they don't really see it as them. If they win in a tournament, you know what they're going to attribute it to? Not their ability, but to what? Anybody want to guess? When you go to Las Vegas, what do you hope you have a lot of other than cash? Luck. Yeah. Nice match today. Oh, I got lucky, you know? They just really weren't that good. Right? Experts would never say that. Hardly ever did they say, I got lucky. Right? We're going to get into that. But they don't take responsibility. And then finally, they lack comfortable routines. And so if you can help them learn routines, like for example, pre-shot routines, you use those right before a tennis serve. How about routines before you get ready to play? What makes a player prepared to go? Most beginners don't know that. Do you know what John Wooden, some of you remember who he was? Yes? John Wooden, probably one of them, I will say this, the most successful college basketball coach in the history of college basketball. No one will ever rival his record, ever. We know that for a fact. They changed the rules, but for a fact. Do you know the first thing that he used to teach his players?
How their shoes.
Yeah, how to tie their shoes. Exactly. Do you know why?
Want them all to conform.
Well, that wasn't the reason. If you don't put your shoes on properly and you start running around, what's going to happen? Blisters. You get blisters, can you practice? No. So let's start with the fundamentals. So one of the routines was he taught them how to tie their shoes. I don't know where he went from that. I wasn't all that interested, but I thought that was interesting. So think about your beginners. You have to get them to develop routines. If you're teaching them, let's say you give them a series of lessons, how do you want them to warm up? What would make a good warm-up for them? They don't know. What kind of equipment should they have, and how should they take care of it? They don't know. All right. So the USTA says that somebody at the 1.5, 2.0 level needs on-court experience. And that's right. Beginners learn best from experience. In fact, sometimes they learn better all by themselves than without a teacher or a coach, believe it or not. What they need, the kind of experience they need most is practice. Again, we talked about the importance of developing sound technique in their strokes, and the fundamental ground strokes, their serve, and so forth. They need lots of practice. Some competition is good, but not too much. Because what will happen is, because they don't have the technique down, they'll start to make compromises in their strokes. So some competition is good, but mostly it's practice that they need. The more time they spend hitting a ball against the wall or a backstop, the better those strokes are going to be. Or the more you feed them, the better that's going to be. And so they do. They need experience. Experience more than information, believe it or not. Guidance and demonstrations from experienced coaches. But I'm going to show, oh, thank you. Can I get a mimosa? Guidance and demonstrations from experienced coaches. They will watch you, believe it or not. They will look at how you dress, how you carry yourself. They'll watch your strokes. But you know what's even more important? They'll watch their peers. We model best from people that we best relate to. I used to do some consulting for Golf Magazine. By the way, the former editor of Tennis World is now working for Golf Magazine. Shows you how that business works. At any rate, one of the things they wanted to know is why do people read articles in a magazine? And so what we did is we took, I don't think you were part of this study, Sophie. We took a table and set it out at a private facility, a public facility, and then just a practice area, a driving range. And we had 10 articles laid out, and we asked golfers to take a look, which article would you most likely to read, which would you least likely to read? And then we asked them why, of the 10. The ones that they rated the highest, believe it or not, were models that looked most like them. In golf, that's a 55-year-old white overweight male. True. And that's the one that they focused on most. And when we said, why would you read that article? He looks just like me. So whatever is going to work for him is going to work for me. There was one that had pictures of Tiger Woods, and he ranked fairly low. Tiger Woods, at the time, one of the greatest golfers, or #1 golfer in the world. Why wouldn't you read Tiger Woods' article? I'll never play like Tiger Woods. You know, whatever works for him isn't going to work for me. What ranked last was the cartoons, the illustrations, which really tore the heart out of the art director for Golf Magazine. But why wouldn't you read that article? Because I'm not a cartoon. And so what the research says is that they will watch people who are similar to them. So why not have some of your beginners, believe it or not, teach each other? And I know Sophie's not a beginner, but let's watch Sophie hit some ground strokes. What do you see? I'm talking to you as if you were a beginning tennis player. What do you see in Sophie's swing? What do you notice she does with her feet? How do her shoulders move? They'll learn from each other. Probably even a little bit more. Yes, so go.
You know, when I demonstrate a serve, you know, and I'll be like, all right, look, step in and put some power behind it. And they're like, well, that's nice, you know, but I'm never going to be able to do that. But
Yeah.
I said, look, Therese can do it.
Yep.
What? Therese can do it? Well,
Yep.
I should be able to do it then.
There you go. Exactly, that's the point. And kids are the same way. You know? And you will have kids that can demonstrate for each other. It's a very powerful way of learning. So have them observe peer performances. Let them watch each other and critique each other, help each other learn. All right, capable. That's the next level up. According to the USTA, at this level, they're able to learn to judge where the ball is going on the court, although court coverage is weak. They know where it's going, they just don't know what to do with it. By our definition, capable means you can get the job done. You could go out, you could play a reasonable set of tennis and have a good time doing it. Your strokes are okay, your knowledge of the sport is good. Again, think about it. Experience, skills, and knowledge are at a higher level than a beginner, and you're able to function out there on the court. So what happens is they become more responsive to situations and less rule-bound. So you can actually now think about how do you modify your ground strokes, backstrokes, or forehand, depending on what the situation is. Right? Beginners, you can't do that with. Capable, you're able to do that with. Also, they see similarities across contexts when they're either assessing a situation or they're looking for solutions. For example, if you're playing an opponent and you consistently have success with one kind of serve, well, can you emulate that with a particular ground stroke? In other words, is there some similarities? Or if you've played an opponent like this before, you know, a really tall person or a really quick person, what worked with them? What will work with this person? And again, let's think beyond just the skills. You teach and you coach a game. You don't coach a stroke. You coach a game. So get them to think strategically. And again, this goes a step beyond the skills. In other words, see in action 1 or 2 moves ahead. If you serve it here, what is likely going to happen? If you serve it there, what's likely going to happen? If you hit a forehand deep, what's likely going to happen? Where do you need to be? And oftentimes we don't teach that. I do see that when doubles instruction is going on. We had an opportunity to do some research with some great, I don't see Jorge, where is he? Jorge Andrews was one of our, oh, I'm sorry, there you are, Jorge. You were part of this study.
That's right.
Yeah, and you taught doubles. And this is one of the things I noticed the expert tennis instructors were doing. You were teaching strategies, weren't you? Not just strokes. And it was brilliant. And when we looked at the beginners, what do you think they were teaching? Basically, they were emphasizing the strokes. And so you were, I thought the level of instruction was much more appropriate because you were teaching people that were about capable, competent level. Remember that? It had to be 2.5, is that what it was? Yeah, or higher. So, and again, I noticed how your group of experts zeroed right in on that, and you knew who you were teaching, which was really great. And by the way, I was really amazed because you had that within like 5 minutes. You had that discussion before you even got on the court. That's a whole different issue, but we'll get to that. So where do capable players learn from? Again, experience is important. Some practice, but now they need more competition because they're starting to develop the way they think on the court. That's capable. Then they're also able to analyze and understand the importance of strokes. If I can't get to the shot down the line and return it effectively, what do I need to work on? Is there something wrong with my forehand stroke to that side? Maybe I need more practice in that. So they're able to do that. Or if I'm double faulting all the time, obviously, what do I need to work on? It's interesting, I do some work with, those of you that are from the Atlanta area, probably heard of the Atlanta Hawks. It's our national basketball NBA team here. And I do some work with their player development coach, Kenny Atkinson. And one of the things that we monitor very carefully is certain key statistics on the team to know what to practice. I'll just give you one example. Turnovers, meaning that we have the ball and now we're giving it to the other team. That's not good in basketball. You can't score if you don't have the ball. So that's one thing we monitor very carefully, and if that's not happening, in other words, we're not effectively passing, we need to practice that more. So that's how we sculpt practices, by monitoring performance. Capable players absolutely need teachers. The beginners need teachers to some degree, but you know, they need more experience. They need more time with the racket in their hand trying to hit a ball someplace that they're intending to go. They actually need less information. You need a teacher more as you move through, not less. You know, it's funny, I look at our public schools in America, and you look at, how many of you have kids that are in elementary school? Okay, a couple. I look at what elementary school kids today have to do, it just astounds me. It's almost like they've got to get ready for application to Harvard next week. But then you look at high school, and we expect almost nothing out of them. We've got it backwards. And so I kind of question that. But generally in this area is when they're ready for more information. That's when you need to amp up the knowledge they have about the strokes and about the game. You also need to develop their skills a little bit better. Here's where you're really starting to tweak, refine, and get those skills technically solid. All right. Now they also can learn from other sources. Things like their peers. Maybe give them an article to read. Maybe attend a workshop or do a junior camp or something like that. At this level, they're ready for it. Beginners, probably not so much. But here's a great opportunity to do that. All right, so to become competent, let's get middle level. What do you need to do? Well, according to the USDA, competence is achieved with improved stroke dependability. Again, you're able to do it competently, so you could rely on the strokes you have. With directional control on moderate shots, but still lacks depth and variety. In other words, they still need some skills, some knowledge, and a little bit more experience, right? But they can handle the situation. This is one thing we notice with competent players. They have contingency plans. They start to think, if this happens, then I'm going to do that. If that happens, then I'm going to do this. Talk to your players. By the way, one of the dividing characteristics between great coaches and mediocre coaches is great coaches ask lots of questions of their players. And here's why that's so important. You all know tennis. All of you know tennis. The ones that separate, like the Jorge Andrews from everybody else, is Jorge knows his players. So he knows how to get the information about the game into that player's head and onto that court for that player. In other words, he knows what to say, when to say it, and how to say it because he knows the player. You listen to the beginning tennis instructors, and they basically teach the same way to all players. It's those who understand what their players are all about that really are able to make the difference. Sorry, I can't go there. I was going to tell you the conversation Yvonne had with Andy Murray a few years ago, but I don't have permission to use that story. but it made a huge difference in Andy's game. But think about this, if then. We think about this all the time. Most of you that live in a suburban or even a rural area, you know, at 5 o'clock you're going to drive home. You think, okay, if it's 5 o'clock, then I'm going to take this route. But you know, if I wait an hour, then I can take that route. That's a contingency plan. And you do that on the court. And when that begins to happen, that's a sign of a competent player. Get them to think. They're able to distinguish between the important and the unimportant. You've heard that before, right? Do you know what it means? Let me tell you, because we did a study on it. Oops. First of all, what's important are the things that influence the performance outcome. The things that influence the performance outcome. Sophie, this comes from your research, right? You can say this better than I can. So they only focus on the factors that are going to influence the game. They don't worry about things like what the opponent's wearing or what the weather's like, unless it's going to influence the outcome. They worry about things that are going to make a difference, like where does this ball need to go? How well am I playing? How tired am I? Do I need to hydrate? Next, what's under your control? One of the players that I worked with on the PGA Tour for a number of years, I won't use his name, but he would always worry about the shot that he just hit if it was a poor shot. Many of you have players like that in tennis, right? I was watching University of Georgia play North Carolina State last weekend in the regional NCAA tournament. And our #1 player melted in the second set. Just melted because he lost, but was focused on things that were out of his control. You know, things like what the other player was doing. When you do that, you can't be focused on what you need to do. He was worried about shots that he made before, the mistakes, and they were piling up. And every mistake just made the next one worse. And so he had that, we call it, the wheels are falling off in golf. I don't know what you would call it in tennis, but it's just that downhill slide. You cannot control a shot you've already hit. Would most of you agree with that? It's out of your control. Once it leaves your racket, there's nothing you're going to do about it. And if you start to focus on it, you're focusing on things that are completely out of your control, which means you're focused on things that aren't going to make a difference. You're giving your attention to the wrong things. You need to focus on what can be improved. You need to focus, you often hear sports psychologists say you have to be in the present. I believe that a little bit. I also believe you need to be slightly into the future because you have to be worried about your next move and your next move after that. So these are the 3 factors that distinguish what's important on the court and what's not important. What will affect this game or this outcome? What can I control? And then how do I make it better? That's important. All right. So, competent players, how do you teach them? First of all, you have to teach them to start to build momentum. To stop thinking about tennis as one stroke at a time. Think about it more like a chess match. And so they start to think strategically. Momentum's important for well, most of you know. I mean, how often have you watched a match and you've seen the momentum swing from one player to another? I love watching Wimbledon because doesn't it happen there all the time? French Open, does it happen once in a while? Yeah, all the time. So you have to teach people how to build momentum and keep momentum moving. And one of the ways to do that is focus on the long-term plans. See the bigger picture. It's not just necessarily about one point. What are you going to do when this happens? Again, contingency plan. Let's talk about experience for competent players. Some practice, more competition. Some practice. They do need to practice. By the way, there's really 2 reasons to practice. And if you know this already, please forgive me. But a lot of sport instructors don't know this. One reason to practice is to improve skill, right? And the second reason is to develop timing. Warm-up is about timing. I often hear players say that they're practicing just before a match. They're not. They're warming up. They're focusing on their timing. If you go to the Braves game here in Atlanta, they have batting practice. The purpose behind batting practice isn't to improve my technique. If it is just before a game, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's to work on my timing So when I'm in the game, I can do it. And tennis is the same way. I don't have to tell you how important timing or rhythm is to a game of tennis. And that's all they should be focusing on. No technique. So at this point, yeah, they need to develop skills, but isolate those skills and make sure the practice has a purpose. Yeah, I'll tell you this story. There's a new coach here for the Hawks. His name's Mike Budenholzer. Mike came from San Antonio. Love Mike. I think he's done a great job. But one of the things I'm trying to get Mike to do when he has a practice with the Hawks is tell him what the purpose is behind the activities. In other words, they have one activity they start in the beginning of practice. He calls it the multi-mixer. It's a passing type of drill. And I said, Mike, do they know why they're doing it? And he goes, well, they should. I said, well, how do you know? They can't read your mind. And so if you just tell them, he says, well, it's really two reasons. One is so they can kind of get the passing down. The other is to kind of get their heart rate up just before the start of practice, get them to do something together. Why don't you tell them that? So they'll know why they're doing it. And oftentimes we don't do that with players. And the higher you get up into the expertise level, particularly combat, they have to know why. So tell them why you're doing this, what it's going to help, what it's going to develop. At this level, it's absolutely essential they have qualified teachers and coaches. Beginners, capable players, they're fine with parents, they're fine with friends, they can develop that way. But once you get to this level, you have to make sure that your game is sound. Your skills, your knowledge, and the kinds of experiences you have. If you aspire to develop your game, if you like it the way it is, you don't need one. But qualified teachers and coaches, people like yourselves, this is where you're absolutely essential because you can hone in on a player's needs like nobody else. Right? Many of you probably, when you started out, I'm not going to say all of you, when you started out in tennis, probably just had a racket, a couple of friends, and a ball, and you went onto the court and you beat it around a little bit. You didn't get a lot of coaching, but you fell in love with the sport, and you developed skills. And then as you move through your level of expertise, you more and more had better coaches, is what I'm going to assume. And that's why these people really need coaching. And the competent players, don't be afraid to encourage them to sign up for a couple of lessons. Don't come to me just when you think you have a flat tire. You know, let's really try to build your game. They're also learned from other sources within the field. They'll talk to their colleagues or their peers. They'll attend seminars. I don't know, how many of you have seminars in your club? Will you come in and you talk about a topic? Yeah, Jorge, is it fairly successful?
Very successful.
Yeah, what kinds of topics do you talk about? Or seminars?
A lot of have to do how to deal with the parents or how the parents deal with the kids.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Boy, I bet that saves a lot of problems, doesn't it? Yeah.
It helps.
It helps a lot, yeah. And again, you know, at this level and higher, they don't always need on-court education. Sometimes they could take it off the court, and they can learn from other things. I saw a tennis pro in the Athens area, where I live, in the Athens area, would have a Wimbledon party, obviously in the morning on Sunday mornings, when he would invite the members to come in and they would analyze what was going on. I thought that was just brilliant. They would talk about strategies, strokes were there, and it kind of gave just a novice player or a competent player an inside look from a professional's eyes as to what was really going on the court. All right, let's talk about people now that are probably at the upper levels in your club, the proficient people. According to the USTA, these are people who vary strategies and styles. In other words, their knowledge and their skill set is so extensive and their level of experience is so extensive that they know how to change and adapt. Strategies and styles in competitive situations, and their hits dependable shots in stress situations. These are people that can come through at a very high level, obviously. So what are they doing? First of all, they're relying on instincts in situations. They don't consciously think about what it is they're doing every time. Rather than using rational analysis, they use their instincts. I had the opportunity to ask Lendl about his first major championship, a French Open, I believe it was '81. And he was playing John McEnroe. Interesting side to that. I was asking him, by the way, you know, you see him on TV, he is really a nice guy. He's really tall, but he's a really nice guy. And you see that dead face. He's not like that. He hates the media because he feels like they will skewer him every chance they get. That's why he reacts the way he does with that. But we're talking about his first French Open. He had lost in the finals to two previous majors, and I think one was the US Open, and the other might have been Australia, or it might have been two US, I don't remember. But I said, what was the difference? You know, what got you over the hump? And he said, you know, all I did was focus on the ball coming over the net and hitting the ball back over the net. That's all I focused on, nothing else. I said, really? And he said, you know, and then after a while, I looked up at the scoreboard and I was leading. I said, you were leading, and that's when you discovered when you looked up. He said, yeah, all I was doing was concentrating on getting the ball back over the net. Kind of an aside to that, I asked him a little bit about his psychology when he played, and he confessed this. With McEnroe, he would do everything possible to keep him calm. He said things like, you know, if the ball was called out and McEnroe thought it was in, Yvonne said, I used to look at him and go, John, I thought it was in too. You know, sorry. You know, anything to keep him calm. With Jimmy Connors, just the opposite. Everything to just make him twitch. Right? Things like Connors was ready to serve. Yvonne said, I was always adjusting my strings, especially when it got late in the match. She said it would just send him into orbit. So there is psychology at that level. I thought that was kind of cute. None of you have ever done that before. That's why I thought I might share. No, of course not. All right. So, to become proficient, let's talk about that. You begin to need to think intuitively. Follow your senses. I think you have to do everything the way it's always been done before. Follow your instincts. What's really critical is your routines. Now, let me just mention something about routines. We've done some research with, this was in swimming, with the Olympic gold medal winners in swimming, men and women. And we wanted to know what they did on their competitive days that helped set them up for being successful. And at first they told us, well, we don't have a routine. It varies all the time. At the end of the study, they said, yes, we do have a routine, but it's very flexible. We don't always have to do exactly the same thing all the time. They had a time when they got up. They like to generally go to the pool, if possible, to get a little morning swim in, because the finals were always at night. Just a little warm up. Then they'd go have breakfast. Right? And they did that. They would swim in the morning because that's when they were used to practicing, so it just felt natural to them. They'd have breakfast, and then maybe they'd go back to bed, or they varied here. Some people like to go do a social activity that would get their mind off what was going on. Some people like to do an individual activity, like listen to music, or go to a movie, something along that line. When I asked Lendl about his routine, he used to hit with Tony Roach in the morning, then he'd have lunch, he'd go get a massage, and then he'd take a nap. I said, you could sleep before a major championship? He goes, oh yeah, like a baby. So I thought that was remarkable. I couldn't do something like that. So they all have routines. Now here's the thing that made the swimmers really unique to my mind, is they always anticipated something was going to go wrong. And I'm sharing this with you because maybe this will help one of your players. Something's going to go wrong. The bus is going to get a flat tire on the way to the venue, or my swimsuit's not going to show up, or my goggles are going to break, or you name it. And if something went wrong, something else was going to go wrong. So when it went wrong, it didn't throw them off. Now, let me tell you about somebody it did throw off. This was in the Beijing Games, and I won't mention the swimmers. Right? They got up on the platform. There was two, and this is in the finals. I won't mention the event. This was in the finals. There was two Americans. One was expected to win the gold medal. It wasn't Michael Phelps. It was one of the few events that Phelps wasn't in. And this guy was really odds-on favorite to win. And then there was a guy towards the end of the pool, the last lane, who was just basically, they thought he was lucky to be in the finals. Well, do you remember in the Beijing Games, the swimmers had those compression suits? They used different materials. It's been since banned. They can't use it anymore because it was just a huge advantage. So they made it go back to the old materials. Well, they pass out the hats. Most of you have seen the swimmers. They put the hat on. It has to have the flag of the country and has to have their name on it. All right, so they pass out the hats when the guys get up on the starting block. Well, they handed the guy who was supposed to win the gold medal his hat, his cap to put on. He looks at it. It's the wrong material. It's the old material. It's not the new material that he's been training with. So he puts his hat on, and what do you think he's thinking about? The guy who was just lucky to be there, he gets the hat, and we asked him afterwards, what'd you think when you got that? And he said, I just laughed. He said, somebody screwed up. Doesn't that always happen? You know, it's the Olympics, and everybody thinks everything's perfect. Nothing's perfect. He said, I laughed, and he said, you know, I've swam like my whole life with this hat. So he puts it on, gets in the water. When he's done, he's standing on the podium getting his bronze medal. The person who's supposed to get the gold medal, what do you think he's thinking about the whole time he's swimming in the gold medal finals in the Olympics? The hat. Came in fifth. All right? Why? Routines. Routines. If you know something's going to go wrong, you just deal with it. You just handle it, and you move on. You can't let it distract you. Proficient players should know how to do that. If they can't deal with it, they're never going to get to the next level. So they learn best from experience, but at this level, it's specialized practice. They have to have a very specific purpose. In fact, at this level, when they start to aspire to get maybe to the upper elite level or professional level, most of the time you have to get them to practice less, not more. Because if they're practicing too much, what's going to happen is fatigue's going to set in, injury's going to set in, and their ability to perform is going to decline. So you have to restrict the practice, but make it more intense and more specialized. Better to have a 1 hour, highly intense practice than a 3 hour practice where everything's just kind of loosey-goosey. You will, as they say, perform like you practice. So make it intense, make it focused, make it specialized. This is what we're working on. When we're done with this, we're done with practice. And then they also need, as most of you know, high-level competition. You will play to the level at which you were used to being played. So they've got to find players who are better. Encourage them to play better. Players, if they aspire to be better. If they just want to have fun out there, okay, that's a different consideration. They will learn most from others, both in tennis, but now outside of tennis. Where do you learn psychology? Okay, you could learn it from tennis players like Yvonne, or you could learn it from psychologists. How many of you read the book Mindset by Carolyn Dweck? Yeah, good book, isn't it? Yeah. Could some of that apply to tennis and what you? Yeah, absolutely. And so at this level, you could go outside the field. Or biomechanics. Something that might work in one field could certainly come in and use another. How do they practice in a sport that might be similar to tennis? What kinds of things work? Conditioning programs, nutrition programs. At this level, you need highly qualified and experienced teachers and coaches. Absolutely. They're critical. If you're going to get better, you need to do that. I often told people Tiger Woods was considered one of the greatest golfers in history, and he always had a golf instructor. Jack Nicklaus, some of you remember Jack. It was a guy named Jack Brown. It was his golf instructor throughout his life. And so at this level, it becomes even more important to have good coaching. Does that mean as a coach, you have to coach them like beginners? Not at all. Sometimes you just need to be there to help them discover what they need to know. Let me put it another way. Sometimes you have to be there just to ask the right questions so they can discover their own truths. They need help with that. So outside resources, reading, seminars, clinics, this is all great for proficient players. Where they're not going to learn as much is just from going out on the court and doing the practice like a beginner, a capable, or a competent player did. They won't get better by playing at a level that's below their abilities. Right? They have to up their game, if you will. All right, let's talk about experts. We'll bring it to a close. First of all, experts see winning as a consequence of their ability. They need to believe that. And so that's how you have to convince players that they are successful, that they can do it. And the way to do that is when they are successful, point that out to them. They will associate failure then with a lack of effort. I have the ability to do it. Why wasn't I successful? Because I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I didn't try hard enough in the competition, or maybe I didn't try hard enough in practice, or maybe I didn't work out enough, so I'm not in shape. But they will attribute it to their effort. So coaches, praise effort. because you can't control the abilities that you have, your natural physical abilities. What you can't control is how much effort you put into something. Same with your players. So when your players are really working hard, you know that's a key to their success. Crazy. So to succeed, you have to try harder. For most experts, failure increases motivation. For people who are beginners, capable, even competent players, failure is discouragement. Most experts, failure is motivation. Maybe I didn't beat you this time, but I'm playing you. And maybe you can win 9 out of 10 times, but you know what? I'm going to beat you one time. And we're going to keep playing. Right? Give me that chance. They take measured risks. They don't feel like they always have to do the same thing. And they direct their energies to challenges rather than worrying about things. This opponent has not lost a match this year. Okay. So what? He's about to now, or she's about to now. All right. What can you control? Focus on that. All right. To become an expert, you have to be an insatiable knowledge seeker. And most of you know that. That's why you're here. We have the skills now are in a graceful automatic skill execution. At this stage, you're really not going to improve somebody's technique.